first, Joe, obviously, thanks a lot for doing this. You've been a great customer, and it's been great working with you guys. And obviously, that same joke I can apply here too. You probably wouldn't have had time for something like this prior to Togo, I'd imagine, but now you got some
Yeah,
free time.
yeah. Things are busy, but yeah, thanks for having me.
Sweet. So we'll start off with like, how is your company using AI to deal with like the labor shortage in construction? Obviously, that's affecting every company, and has been for years now. Um, yeah, how are you guys using AI?
Yeah, so with our department, we've been using AI, obviously for all of our takeoffs and that sort of thing. But where it's come in handy is our approach to pre-construction and construction is not necessarily a new way of thinking, but it's a little bit different than most general contractors operate. We use a process called we've termed it United Project, but what that is a version of integrated project delivery. And so we are utilizing our trade partners to come in and help us do design assist throughout
Okay.
our pre-construction process. And so what Togal allows me and my team to do is spend a lot less time on doing takeoff and some of that grunt work that goes along with putting estimates together. So it speeds up that process and takes some of that time commitment out of doing the takeoff for our bid tabs and allows us to focus more on the constructability and the pre-planning of projects. And so that's been really helpful in my job in being able to dedicate more time into just reviewing plans for coordination and constructability versus just doing quantities and getting that takeoff done. And it's really sped up that process, being able to knock that out and then really focus on working with our trade partners and getting that coordination piece done and relayed over to our design partners as well, so that we can, once we actually get into construction, a lot of those issues are already fixed and talked about, so that we're not creating more RFIs and more change orders during the construction process.
That's awesome. Yeah. Focusing on more of the higher value tasks than just clicking and counting
Yeah,
doors maybe or something like that, right?
yeah, exactly. A lot less time spent just trying to figure out my gross square footage and my net rentable square footage and those sorts of things that take time, or like you mentioned, just doing door takeoff or sink takeoff or fixture takeoff. It really cuts that time down by quite a bit and allows me to really focus on things that maybe my trade partners are either miscalculating or just not thinking of, or just haven't really had spent the time coordinating, and so it allows me to really dig into those details and help at that.
Sweet. And my next question here was about the like we hear this a lot, and I think you mentioned you even heard this recently too from a person you were speaking with, that like there's this misconception that like AI is going to replace all the work that people can do, right?
Yeah,
And I think you had mentioned though that now with Tokel, like you're doing the work of two or three people potentially. So kind of tell me more about that, and hopefully that two to three people thing I said is
yeah, absolutely. So
hearing that right.
as I'm sure a lot of people in the industry right now are experiencing with just labor shortages and finding good people. I've been in that same boat where I've had a few estimators move on to bigger and better things and move into more prominent roles and that sort of thing. So right now my team's a little bit short, and so being able to utilize Togal and with my small team right now, it's allowed me to be able to really dive in and do some actual estimating. Obviously, my position is director, but with where we're at as a company and as my department, I've been jumping into actually doing more of the actual estimating work, and so it's really allowed me to wear multiple hats and be able to do things in a thorough way, without having to lean on two to three people just to get takeoff done. And so where that helps is obviously it's not replacing anybody on my team. I still need people and that help, but what it's allowed me to do is be able to handle multiple things at any given time. And so I think I gave you an example the other day. I was working on a SD estimate, And with my shortage of my team, I was actually doing that whole SD estimate on my own, and I was able to do a full estimate completely solo within about 2 weeks. Turn it in and get that over to the owner, and we're scheduled for an interview next week to hopefully win that job. But it's really allowed me to get that takeoff done quickly, put that into my estimate, into my bid tabs, and really start looking at quantities and start doing that coordination. And in the past, where it's been, where you have multiple people working on these things, somebody's working on door takeoff, somebody's working on flooring takeoff, somebody's working on earthwork. Whereas I was able to do all that in that 2 week period, put that estimate together,
Wow.
and get that turned in without the support of an estimator or two to be able to put that effort together.
Right on. Cool. And like, so that same process there, like it still would have taken 2 or 3 weeks potentially, but like now you like it would have taken 2 or 3 people before. Now you can do it solo, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly,
Okay, wow.
exactly.
That's cool. So, and I probably should have started with this, but kind of tell me about MPC as a company, like what kind of work do y'all do? Where all do you guys do work at? That kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I work for MPC. My title, as I mentioned, is Director of Pre-Construction. Our office is located in Denver, Colorado. We also have an office down in Austin, Texas. So our work consists of all multifamily construction. We'll do anything from podium work, garden style, walk-ups, wraps, infinity, so light gauge steel, that sort of thing. But all of our, at least the Denver office, all of our work is relegated to the Denver metro area. And then every once in a while, we'll travel down to Colorado Springs or up to Boulder. And then Austin, their geographic area is pretty much relegated to Austin and the surrounding areas down there. But yeah, as I mentioned, pretty much the majority of our work is multifamily apartments.
And you guys are like a GC, right? Like
Yeah.
a
So
GC developer.
we're a developer GC. We do have a development arm that feeds our pipeline for the general contractor side.
Okay.
And then my task is working with the pre-construction and pre-planning. And then with that United project process that I mentioned, we're also looping in our project operations teams early on, and being a liaison between our pre-construction department and our field teams, so that we can coordinate who we're going to be using for trade partners, some of the coordination issues that we need to look out for, and really coordinating that information to our field teams, so that once we actually get into construction, we're not having that data loss that with a typical handoff that you spend maybe 1 to 2 days just reviewing bid tabs and takeoff with your operations team. They've been involved from the inception of the project as we get into construction, and it's a really integrated way to transition a project from pre-construction into construction.
Right on. And then how many team members do you guys have using Togal? And I think you're one of our customers that's actually using on the project management side too, but kind of talk about that as you talk about how many people are using Togal there at
Yeah,
MPC.
absolutely. Right now, um, we have, let's see, we have 7 seats. Four are being used in estimating. Two are being used by project management, and one's actually being used by our CEO.
Okay,
Um,
wow.
and and so where that's been beneficial is with, obviously, with the estimating and the takeoff, it's really sped up that process. But where the project management team found it really helpful is the Togal chat function. And so with that, we're able to upload contracts, specifications, documents that are crucial to the actual construction, and our trade partners. And so what they'll do is they'll upload those contracts or the specs or any of those sort of documents into Togal, and they can use the Togal chat function to search for relevant information, search for specific information, questions around a contract. So instead of peeling through a couple 100-page document or 1,000-page spec document, We can utilize Togal to search those things, ask it questions, provide us information quickly. We've also actually used it in a lot of our buyout meetings as well, as questions come up from our trade partners or from our project management team towards the trade partners. I can pull up the Togal chat during those review meetings and find out that information really quickly versus saying, hey, I'll circle back with you after this meeting's done. I need half an hour to be able to peel through this document to try and find this information. I've been able to just use it in real time and provide that information to our trade partners during the meetings
That's
and
crazy.
get that stuff figured out right then and there, so that we're not having to do this back and forth as contracts are being written.
That's super cool to
So
hear. Yeah, like I bet like prior to Togo, you're probably having to like you got all these follow-up tasks, and like your next day is just like going back through and answering all those
exactly,
questions you talked about during the meeting. Now the meeting is more productive. You're knocking out work right there on the meeting with Togo Chat.
exactly. It's been super helpful and speeds up that process by quite a bit.
So it's more than just a takeoff software, basically.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, that chat function has been a real benefit to just the takeoff and even providing some of that information for the takeoff to dictate how I'm going to do the takeoff as well.
I was also thinking of one thing there too, as you're talking about that. I would imagine there's some benefit of Toggle too, with it all being cloud based, having like the CEO, the PMs, the estimators, having you guys all on one system, all
Mm-hmm.
accessing the same information. That like, can you talk about that a bit compared to like
Yeah,
you were using Bluebeam before, right?
yeah. We were using
Okay.
Bluebeam. We still use Bluebeam for certain functionalities, but I would say I've more or less migrated my takeoff 100% to Togal. It's just the organization of it is much better, and being able to extract that information much quicker has been a lot easier. But the collaboration piece is big as well. With our United Project process, as I mentioned, it's a very collaborative process. So being able to jump into a project and say, okay, how many square feet of concrete do I have on this project? I can have my PMs jump into my takeoff and look at what I've done and say, okay, this deck is 50,000 square feet, or I have X amount of square footage of siding, and X is panel, X is lap, or whatever it is. It makes it easy, and even just from a review standpoint too, we can point out things to other members of the team. On our team, we also have two licensed architects that serve as design managers. And so with
Oh
that,
wow.
their sole task is reviewing plans, looking for coordination issues, code issues, accessibility issues, all sorts of things that you would look at from an architect eye that would really affect the pre-construction and the construction, so that we're identifying all those issues. And so either through takeoff or markups, they can jump into the software and take a look and either make notes for me so that I can pick up a takeoff or a quantity on something, or just note something to say, okay, as you're doing your takeoff, also check out the plumbing drawings, because there's certain things that are showing on the plumbing drawings that aren't necessarily showing up on the architecturals or the structurals, or whatever plans may need to talk together. So we're able to use that and kind of pinpoint things, so that we're not having to just schedule meetings throughout the week and take up time from just producing the work to be able to do that. So it's been really helpful, just collaboration wise. Also I mentioned with our CEO having access to it as well. He's able to jump in and start looking at things to say, if we're looking at a prospective project that's still pretty early on in development, that's maybe at a concept level, we can say, okay, the building as drawn is set up for a certain efficiency, or something like that, and he can go in and look at the takeoff and say, okay, well, what if we adjusted the gross square foot and then the net rentable square foot? How does that affect our pricing? Because we're looking at metrics to say, how efficient is this building? That metric is a pretty simple calculation. It's just the GSF, or the net rentable square footage divided by the GSF, and they'll give you a percentage. And
Hmm.
so as we're looking at projects that are still fairly early on in development, to say, okay, well, this project's only at a 72% efficiency from a square footage standpoint. What if we adjusted these quantities to make this building more efficient? And so I can go back in and kind of back into these things and say, okay, well, if I take this much square footage out of GSF, it's going to reduce your amenity space by X amount. It's going to reduce your circulation by X amount. And then your average unit square footage may shrink a little bit, but it'll help your net rentable cost or your per key cost. And so we can look at it in a way from a development standpoint to say, okay, let's design the building in this way. It'll help our density in on the back end, or however we want to look at it, and just run through scenarios and options on a design standpoint, so that we can, once we actually get into SD level or DD level, we've already talked about how we want to lay this building out for maximum efficiency and cost, to say that owners are always looking at target costs and in their performance to say, okay, I need to hit this number. And so if we're, from a base plan, if those numbers or efficiencies are skewed and then drives those costs up, we can look at it from that standpoint, adjust those quantities in real time, and then adjust our concept estimates to reflect that and say, okay, you need to design your building to these parameters so that we can gain this efficiency to hit your budget targets.
Yeah, like everything you're saying there was talking about like changes to the plans, basically. Like all those different things you're looking at can result in changes to the plan. It sounds like you're changing plans a lot, which
Yeah.
means you need to be you're retaking off jobs a lot. Before that had to
Yeah.
be a very slow process. Every time we make a change, well, we got 3 more days of takeoff ahead of us now. With Togal, I click a button basically, and I'm
Yeah,
right
yeah,
back where I
yeah,
was. It's no problem to
exactly,
make changes.
exactly. I can take floor plate takeoffs and say, just for an example, I was doing it was a 4 level garden style project, and it's kind of a long, skinny building, and
Okay.
in the middle there's an amenity space. They called it a connector, but the main portions of the building were all 4-story, but that amenity space was only 1 story. And so as we're messing with these gross square footages and net rentable square footages, I could say, I can copy and paste and duplicate those floor plates and say, okay, what if we were to add, 3 levels on top of that amenity space? So, what does that do to my overall skin square footage? What does that do to my overall net rentable square footage? What does that do to my gross square footage numbers? And I in 20 minutes, I can figure all that stuff out and make those adjustments in the estimate,
Yeah.
and go about it that way, and say, hey, well, let's add 10 more units to this building. It only reduces the average square footage by 100 square feet per unit, and then you're gaining 10 units. So then on the back end for the owner, they can say, oh, well, I'm adding 10 more units to my pro forma. It really helps my rent. And so it really helps from one, a costing standpoint, but also on a pro forma development standpoint, to say, okay, if we adjust these things, I can adjust my pro forma in this way. And then with those adjustments, that job pencils.
Yeah. Like you have deadlines in these projects, obviously. Like before, you're probably trying to talk the owner out of like, no, let's not make any more changes. Okay, we
Yeah.
want to get this project started, man. Whereas
Yep.
like now, like
Exactly.
we can make 3 iterations in an afternoon. It sounds like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's huge. Okay, and then so like, what kind of made you look for a new takeoff software? I think this is kind of self-explanatory based on those answers you just gave, but I gotta
Yeah,
ask, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think Bluebeam's a great program. I don't want to knock on Bluebeam, but
right.
it has its limitations. I think from just from a coordination standpoint, I think it's great because you can invite architects that there's plenty of companies out there that also use Bluebeam. And
Yep.
so we can set up Bluebeam studio sessions and do some coordination effort that way. But as we're doing takeoff and those sorts of things, um, it was just a little bit cumbersome in certain ways. Setting scales, you're having to go through on each individual page and set a scale and then save the page and do all those things where, in Togal, I just open it up. It's already, the scale is automatically set. I can just go in and start doing my takeoff. And just some of the functionality too, like as we're doing, doing the just the Togal, and then as I'm going in and cleaning up some of the points, with
Hmm.
Bluebeam, I'm sitting there having to go right click, add a point, adjust it, and do all these things which take time. Whereas in Togal, I can just click on the line, add a point, adjust it, much quicker. It just takes out some of that
Yeah, it
that
saves like thousands of clicks.
yeah, cumbersomeness, if we're making up new words. But
Yeah.
yeah, it takes a lot of that out of there, where I can just go in and get the takeoff done. Whereas in Bluebeam, you're having to add 3, 4 extra steps just to do something simple.
Yeah, so like what made you decide that Togal was the right fit? What that kind of process internally? What like was there resistance, that kind of thing?
Um, I wouldn't say there was, necessarily resistance. I think there was just maybe some skepticism a
Yeah,
little bit, to say, hey, we're already using a software, it has this functionality. But then
yeah,
when I sat down with the partners of the company to kind of show them some of these features, it was really impressive. And our CEO sat there and saw all these things and was like, one, with the Total Chat, that functionality was a big benefit for him.
yeah.
And then
That's one of those that almost
two,
needs no training. The Togal chat, like there's no
yeah,
learning curve. It's like ask the damn question, it gives you the answer. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
exactly. And that was just
Yeah,
kind of the thing. We were just sitting in a meeting because we were looking at a prospective project, and he was just like asking me, he's like, how do I use this? What is it good for? And so I just sat with him for 20 minutes and pulled these plans into Togal and said, you know, I opened up the chat function and said, write me a scope of work for the electrical. And,
wow.
within 30 seconds, it gives me a high level scope of work. Just to, at that level, I could copy and paste that into an email and send it to an electrician and say, hey,
Yeah,
just give me a ROM cost for this scope of work, and made it really simple. So they really saw that potential, and our CEO is somebody that really appreciates how technology is evolving and is helping the construction industry, and with how Togal is priced, he was like, do it. Let's
yeah.
use it. It'll we're consolidating our teams, we're consolidating our projects. Let's make sure that we're doing them accurately and correctly, and we'll utilize this to help us do it with our smaller teams.
Yeah, with the cost like saving like 1 hour a week is all it would take to pay for itself, and it's definitely saving more than an hour a week, and like
Oh,
you're doing
absolutely.
more,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
more
I mean,
productive.
if you think about it, estimating salaries ranging, depending on where you're located in the country. But for Denver, it's hard to find somebody that's asking for less than 90,000 a year. And if I have, two employees that are at that salary that are working alongside me on an estimate, you're pay, you can back into that hourly rate, and
Yeah.
basically within 2 days, you're covering that cost.
Yeah, like that scope question alone paid for the month.
Yeah,
Let alone
absolutely.
the takeoff piece and counting the
Yep,
doors and everything like that. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. We talked about that. So over the years, what's been like the biggest bottleneck in the pre-con process, and has that changed now with Total? I think that's like a really good question for
Yeah,
you.
I touched on this a little bit earlier, but for us and MPC with our United Project approach, the biggest bottleneck is just being able to get bid tabs done and takeoff done. And in a GMP scenario, we have 8 weeks to do a total GMP. At DD typically it's about 6 weeks, SD it's about 5 weeks, and so to be able to do all that work within 5, 6, 8 weeks, it's a lot of production just to be able to get the bid tabs completed. And then once you get your bid tabs completed, then either bid days there or bid days already been passed, and so then you're scrambling to get all your proposals put into your bid tabs and get the proposals leveled. And so what Togo's allowed us to do is get that takeoff done a lot faster, and then really focus on getting the scope of work dialed in. And then that way, by the time bid day comes, as proposals are rolling in, we can just throw those into our bid tabs, start evaluating them, and then start having real conversations with our trade partners to get that scope coordination done, or find misses in their estimates, and really focus on the actual project and the constructability and the actual pre-planning portion of it, versus saying, based off what, the architect or the engineers have drawn, this is what your cost is. I can say, okay, this is what you've drawn, this is what the cost is, but what if we looked at it in this way, and we used this product instead of this product, or we utilized this system instead of this system, and it'll save you X amount of dollars. And so we can really work on alternates, or just VE, or we could, or even value management. We could, we like to use that term versus value engineering, because in our eyes, value engineering is, we've gotten into construction, costs have overrun, and now
Okay.
we're trying to claw back to get to a budget target, to say,
Yeah.
okay, we've, in DD, we've already talked about this, we've figured out the solution, now we're into construction, the cost is the cost, and we've reduced it from from this point to this point, and it really provides that service and the benefit for the owner as well as the architect and the design team to say, they're these design teams have these deadlines of trying to get permits by certain dates so that the projects can start. And so we can kind of take that from the architect and do that coordination and pose these solutions to the architect and say, hey, let's do it like this. And then they can just go and draw it and provide us the design versus having to spend that coordination time and figuring that out on their end. We can still keep that same pace in getting our permits, but we've kind of done that thinking for them and provided these solutions with cost backup. And then we can implement them into the plans. And then by the time we get into construction, we're not having to deal with, VE scenarios or using contingency to cover these misses or things like that. So that's where Togal really comes in and alleviates that bottleneck pressure and in just the timeframes that we have and being able to actually focus on the pre-construction versus just the estimating.
Awesome. That was a really good. Like, that's cool to hear all that. So, how much time do you say per takeoff? In this question, I almost wonder if that's even the right way to ask that because you may be spending the same amount of time, you're just doing more takeoff. Or like prior to Togal, were you guys doing full blown takeoffs every time, or like was there just not time for that? And now with Togal, you're doing more takeoffs, or is Togal truly saving time? You're not doing as much takeoff. You're spending less
Yeah,
time overall doing takeoff. Yeah.
it's kind of both scenarios, to be honest.
Okay.
As a GC, we're obviously we're going soup to nuts on all the scopes. It's not like we're just
Right.
focusing on just concrete or just MEPs.
Mm-hmm.
We have to focus on everything. So from a high level standpoint, just producing overall takeoff from your gross square foot or your net rentable square foot. I can do that in a couple hours, and then I can forward all of that information over to our scheduling team so that they can take that information and start producing the schedule.
And by the way, a couple
But
hours for you, you're working on big projects. So a couple
yeah,
hours is
yeah,
impressive as hell.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, we're working on projects that have over 200, 300,000 gross square footage.
That's insane.
Projects that are 300 plus units. And so, within a day, we can have that high level information and send that over to our scheduling team so that they can start working on the schedule and then provide us feedback on, any pinch points within the constructability. But, with that said, kind of back to the more detailed stuff, having it automatically do my sinks, my shower doors, my doors,
Yeah.
things like that. Obviously there's some coordination to do, going back to the door schedules or things like that, and just kind of allocating certain things to different buckets. It really allows me to start focusing on that and say, okay, Mr. Door Sub, I have, X amount of hollow metal door frames, and then the rest are pre-hung wood frame doors.
Yep.
And I can go back and say, hey, looking at two separate contractors, by having that detailed takeoff, I can say, hey, you're a little bit high, but really where you're high is just your metal doors. It's not your wood doors. So maybe focus on that area. And it provides me a lot more data so that I can do that analysis on a costing standpoint to say, hey, your dollar per square foot or your dollar per each is high in comparison. Let's focus on these things. Or I can say, just with lighting takeoff, I can go back and evaluate my lighting trade partners takeoff and say, hey, I think you're short here, or, I only came up with 95 of these light fixtures. You have 102.
Yep.
Where are you finding these extra fixtures so that I can have, more meaningful conversations with these trade partners, and look at things from a more data driven standpoint so that we can help our budgets, help things pencil a little bit better, and then, ultimately getting the best price and the best trade partners on with our jobs.
One of the features I'm talking about there, it sounded like was the AI image search, or that's what we call
Yeah.
it, is image search, and it's similar to Bluebeam, but it uses AI and it like really works well and it's fast. So you can
Yeah.
count
Yeah.
nights.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
It makes that a lot easier because, I may have a fixture that's labeled BX and then there's another fixture labeled BX2. And so
Yeah, it's a
without having to hunt and
simple
peck
search.
through that, I can,
Yeah.
I can do a symbol search and then add the text to it and say, hey, pick up these ones, not these ones. And that's been really, really helpful.
We just made a big improvement to that this week, by the way. And also, you mentioned the shower doors. That like so Togal prior to this week used to count shower doors the same as a normal door. Now it recognizes shower doors separately. Just on
Oh,
Monday,
great.
to start. Yeah, I was like on a demo and noticed that like, wait a second, and I asked them like, yep, that was the update this weekend. So we're
Yeah,
updating it constantly.
great. Yeah, that's
But
super helpful.
so like, how much faster would you say like side by side if you were to do like a race between Bluebeam and Togal? Like, is there a percentage you could give it like
Yeah,
faster?
yeah, absolutely. So, let's just hone in on GSF. Obviously
Okay.
I can, for a six story project, I can get that GSF done. I can do the overall Togal piece, in say 20 minutes. And then I'm
Yep.
going back and then doing my cleanup.
Some
But,
fine tuning.
I
Yeah.
can get all that GSF takeoff easily done in a day, whereas in the past it was taking a couple days to
Wow.
do that. Say I would, when we send out an ITB, typically just the upfront takeoff would take me about a week. But now with Togal and just doing the cleanup, I can usually do that in about 1 to 2 days.
Wow. See, and that's going back to that very first question, like AI replacing people. Like there's still a human involved with that Togal.
Yeah.
It's just like now you've got it's like it's like power tools versus hand tools. Like there's still workers involved, even if you have power tools
Mm-hmm.
on the job site. But
Yeah,
with
yeah,
getting
and
more
as
done.
you're
Yeah.
doing that cleanup too, it really helps you just kind of focus
Understand the
in on
job.
little things that are are just drawn on the plans that if you're just flipping through the pages, you kind of tend to skip over some of that stuff. But as
Yeah.
you're going around the perimeter of the building and then lining things up, you can say, oh well, this is weird that they have a unit where they have a window that looks right into a closet. Why do you have a window looking into a closet? Let's
Yeah.
make this change. It's like it's obviously it's just kind of cleanup for the overall takeoff, but it helps
Hmm.
you really kind of uh pick things up or notice things that in a normal circumstance you wouldn't typically pick up.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes like missed too. Even with the cleanup, with Togal, like it's gonna be faster and typically it's gonna be even more accurate because it's measuring everything. You've got more time to make it perfect, basically. Whereas
Yeah,
before it's like let's just throw a number at it. We'll call that some waste. It's all good, but because we
yeah.
just got to get this done. Now with Togal, I can make it perfect and be faster.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, even to that point, say even if I'm going fast and in a scenario where I didn't have time to do cleanup, which I don't, I
yeah,
guess I wouldn't see that scenario. But with that said, just looking at from the Togal takeoff and then my cleanup, I had one project that I was looking at. I think the floor plate was call it 60,000 square feet. Even just with my cleanup, the total delta between the Togal takeoff and then and the updates with cleaning that up, I think it was roughly 50 square feet. On a
yeah.
60,000 square
That's
foot
the funny
deck.
thing too. It's
So,
more of like a visual thing. Like visually, it looks like
yeah,
it needs cleaned up a little bit, but typically it doesn't change the square footage hardly at all. Yeah,
yeah, right. So, if you're just having to get some quick information over to somebody, you can say, okay, well, this deck is, 60,000 square feet plus or
right.
minus, say 50 square feet.
Yeah, that's awesome. So last couple of questions here, and then we'll jump into questions from the audience here. But what's your favorite feature of Togal?
I would say I have three.
Okay, that's a good
I
problem to
would,
have.
yeah. So I would say the first is the image search function with the text.
Okay,
That
that's
really
huge.
helps me just kind of search through plans, look for small
And
components like fire extinguisher cabinets.
And
I
sorry to
can,
apologize you on that one too. Like the text search, like one thing that's different between Bluebeam and Togal is like on Bluebeam only vectorized PDFs that works on, right? The text
mm-hmm.
search and the image search works all right and Bluebeam. But Togal, like even a non-vectorized PDF, it still works perfectly fine. I even have hand-drawn plans you can search the text on, no
Yeah,
problem. It's a big advantage. But
yeah,
sorry, keep
yeah.
going.
No, absolutely. And then the next, yeah, I guess I'll combine them. It's the merge and the cut tool.
Okay,
Being able to quickly just pick up maybe a closet or something that just the Togal missed or something like that. Just draw a quick box around it,
and
picks
merge
it up
it.
really fast. But at the same time, as I mentioned, that project, that garden style project with the 1 story amenity, I was able to just basically copy and paste my base floor plate, and then as the building went up, the shape was the same, but levels 2, 3, and 4 didn't have that second, third, and fourth level. So I could just basically copy paste that floor plate and then go in, take that cut tool, cut out that connector piece, and
Oh wow,
basically
okay.
just have those floor plates there, and then I can it helps me adjust my skins and all that sort of stuff. And then the last one is the Togal chat. That one has been extremely helpful.
For sure. Okay, cool. And then what's been the learning curve with Togal? I'm starting out.
It's
What's
actually
the big fear
been
usually?
not steep at all. I mean, if you use Bluebeam or OST or any of the basic estimating softwares out there, the functionality is pretty much the same. I would just say there's just kind of some enhanced features, like I was mentioned, the control points on perimeter takeoffs or whatever, just being able to add control points at will or take away control points at will has been super helpful. It's very intuitive. I will say, obviously I think the biggest learning curve is just the shortcuts.
Yeah.
The takeoff, being able to produce the takeoff is a breeze. There's not much learning there. You can
Yeah,
just
you click a
kind of
button.
jump in and start doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the shortcuts have been, I'd say, the steepest, and not that it's very steep at all, but at the same time, with the help features and support there, I can just jump on the chat and write a quick message and say, hey, Michael, how do I do this? And, within 15 minutes, he gets back to me and say, hey, just hit Z or hit, whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, and solves it pretty quick. And then you're there. So,
Okay, and last question before we get to the audience question. So, what would you say to those in the construction industry that are hesitant to make a change in their process, or maybe even hesitant about using AI?
I would say it's like you mentioned, it's the power tool. You
Yeah,
can just go in, instead of burning out your arm, just sawing boards with your arm. Get the
just
circular saw.
yeah,
Let's do this quickly, and you can spend so much less time just doing the busy work of getting quantities, and spend more time focusing on the actual construction and leveling bids, and having these conversations, so that you're just coordinating and doing those things in a better way and in a more detailed way, so that you can really reduce the risk as you get into construction, and really pinpoint on just working with your trade partners to get those things picked up and negotiated, versus just being like, hey, I haven't gotten to review your proposal yet. I still have a week of takeoff yet to do. I'll get back to you next week. I can say, hey, my takeoff's done. I have, X amount of flooring, and you have X amount of flooring. Where are you finding this extra quantity? Let's talk about that. Or, let's talk about these products, and look at something that's an equal switch but saves me money. So
yeah.
that's my big thing, is spending less time doing the busy work and actually focusing on the constructability.
Yeah, and that goes to too. Sorry that I keep like adding to what you're saying, but it's you're saying so many good things. So like on that topic there, everyone has a fear or I see on Reddit people talk about AI and like AI is never gonna be able to pick up these conflicts in the drawings and that kind of stuff, and that's true. Like AI is not
Mm-hmm.
good at critical thinking, but that's now you've got more time to focus on those things versus
Yeah,
less. But AI is great at counting doors, for example, or
yeah,
measuring rooms or measuring
yeah,
walls, like no
yeah.
problem.
Absolutely. Everybody, I'm sure, on this call can count to 100. Let it do that for you, and then you can spend time just focusing on what you need to.
Like, wait, they missed the number there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's answer some questions here. I see the first one is um what is your process to get the quantities from Togal into your estimates? That's a good question. We get that a lot. So
Oh yeah,
curious.
that's been a breeze. So with the export function, after I
Okay.
get all of my quantities done, you can go over to the export tab, click the export tab, and then if whatever you're doing, you can aggregate all of your data, just depending on how you have everything organized, or you can filter it to say, give me just the light fixtures, or just give me the flooring. And so then you can export that into Excel really easily. The formatting is really great. And then once you have that Excel sheet downloaded, you can manipulate it however you want. You can set your bid tabs up in a way to match your takeoff, and then it's more or less just copy and paste from after it's exported into Excel. You take that Excel sheet, copy and paste it, and put it into your bid tabs. And so it's been really, really helpful in just basically taking out that time to say, okay, well, here's my data table off to the right on OST. I'm going to manually type this into Excel. I can just copy it, paste it over into my Excel document, and it's
Yeah.
there.
You can
So
copy
that's
straight from Togal. And then like all those tools, do you use those like how you can like filter and sort and group your data, all that kind of stuff
yeah.
to kind of line it up better with your pricing spreadsheet?
Yeah, exactly. For say a podium project where everything below podium is type one construction, and everything above is type three or type five. I can separate to say, okay, just give me my quantity of doors on level one and two.
Yeah.
So then I can separate that information. Yeah, that's been a huge help. I think just either sorting it by level, sorting it by area. Just that sort function is super helpful too. Or just to say, if I'm just looking at unit 1.A, I can separate it for unit 1.A just depending on how you want to set up your takeoff. But yeah, it's a lot more helpful in just being able to export into Excel, take that and put it in there. In comparison to Bluebeam, obviously Bluebeam has that function in exporting into Excel, but the amount of things that Bluebeam just takes and just dumps into Excel, you end up spending
Yeah.
a good amount of time just formatting your Excel sheet, just to take out just the random notes of things that it puts in there. It kind of takes a lot of that fluff out of there, and just gives you the information that you need.
Yeah, and those that don't know, like our Togal export tab to Excel, it essentially works like a pivot table. Like every functionality of a pivot table is what our export has. You can filter, you can sort, you can only include like certain drawings in there, like whatever you want. You can sort it just like an Excel pivot table, basically.
Yep.
Um, and then this next question is, what if you have an addendum or a document needing updated takeoff? How do you go about updating the takeoff and bringing that into the estimate?
It's really easy. As far as uploading plans into Togal, I could either upload that addendum, say it's an architectural addendum, I could upload it into my architectural folder, or I could set it, I can create a brand new folder and just call it architectural addendum, upload those plans into that folder. And then, with that said, I can just do the Togal takeoff of that addendum, do it really quickly. And then, with that said, I could export it in a way that I could just compare the two quantities, to say, okay, give me export the base architectural and then export the addendum. And then I can look at those deltas, side by side really quickly to say, okay, it adds, 15 sinks or, whatever it is, to say, okay, and then I can email that quantity over to my countertop sub, or to my plumber, and say, hey, this addendum came in. I've already done the takeoff. Just give me an ad for these 15 sinks, and it speeds that process up quite a bit.
That's awesome. Yeah, and like I believe if I'm not mistaken, in most softwares out there, like when new addendums come out, you have to make a whole new project. With Togal, you just
Yeah.
add a new set or new folder within that same project, so you're keeping yourself organized, kind of the way the projects should be
Yeah.
organized.
Yeah, and even to touch on the overlay piece too, to say,
Oh
okay,
yeah,
I got this new drawing. I can just do a quick overlay. It takes me 15 minutes just to do the overlay and see what's changed. Even without doing a takeoff, I can just look at the plans, and it'll highlight what's changed. Even just on the general notes off to the side, or even just with the Togal chat, I could bring those up and then just ask Total Chat and say, hey, is there, not necessarily what's changed, but I can just ask it specific questions, and it'll
but
tell me
yeah,
that information too.
what kind of flooring's on this one? Then ask the same, what kind of flooring's on this one, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
And
exactly.
I actually have a pro tip for you there on the overlay function. It's not in our keyboard shortcuts, but if you're on the overlay function, you press T on your keyboard, you can toggle between the two drawings quickly, like back and forth, back and forth. Kind of
Mm-hmm.
cool. We need
Yeah,
to add that to the keyboard shortcuts for sure.
yeah. I mean, if anybody's been doing overlays in Bluebeam, how cumbersome and challenging it is, especially if the plumbing plans are not
Same
set
scale.
up on, say, yeah, in scale to the architecturals. You can just adjust it in real time instead of having to spend 2 days just trying to coordinate that overlay in Bluebeam. It's much faster.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions here? I see there's still quite a few people on here. This has been super helpful though. Thanks so much, Joe.
Yeah,
See if anybody else
absolutely.
has any last minute questions.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sweet. Looks like we're good. Yeah, thanks so much. This was awesome. We learned so much from you, and it sounds like you're using like literally every feature Togal has to offer, which is like super
Yeah,
helpful.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's I to be honest, I haven't found anything that I've found fluffy or just not necessary. Everything
Yeah, it's all
that
has a
shows
purpose.
up is yeah, absolutely has a purpose.
Sweet. Well, thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day, and you still have time for lunch today, hopefully, because you got Togal.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, we're still good. Yeah. Thanks for having me again. This was a pleasure.